Well, good evening. This is Bishop Larry Ward, and I'm here on BLAW Live on this Tuesday evening. So glad you're here. Tell somebody that we're online and tell somebody that we're doing a great discussion tonight as we're covering this topic of women in leadership. So I've been bringing guests on to talk about different facets of leadership as different women have been on BLAW Live to talk about their experiences. And so tonight, I have a great guest with us tonight in the person of Darlene Reid. Just to let you know a little bit about her, she's born and raised in the Bronx, New York, and she's a granddaughter of Jamaican cultivators and domestic workers. She's the daughter of two amazing Jamaican immigrants who are faith-filled encouragers, filled with the Spirit of God, and also they are really encouraging her in her field of chemistry as she's gone to school. Darlene is really interested in youth work. And so for the past 10 years, she's been serving in different areas of youth ministry, helping young people. She serves as a tutor, a teacher, a mentor, and also project coordinators. And she's done some work even at our church as just being a discipler of many of our young people at ALC. And so tonight, as we're talking about women in leadership, we're so glad to have Darlene with us. Just a little about her background when it comes to her education. She has a Bachelor of Science degree in chemistry from Carnegie Mellon University and an MS in chemistry from the University of Oregon. She's a former materials chemist and a consultant who solves problems for companies worldwide. And Darlene is the current project manager in the pharmaceutical industry. And so we're going to be just delighted to talk to her about what that means in terms of her leadership as she's directing people in project management. So, Darlene, hi. Good to have you.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm glad you're here. This is a really important topic that I really have a high interest in women in leadership. And we've had different people on our show and our program. So as I'm talking to you, you're just representing even another generation of women in leadership, and also working in the pharmaceutical industry, and also an accomplished chemist. And so as we're talking about leadership, let me just kind of just start it off. Coming up as you came up in the Bronx and your family is from Jamaica, what was that like for you coming up in New York as your parents came from Jamaica?
Yeah, so I know I started my bio with that. I think it's a huge part of who I am. I know we're talking about leadership tonight, and I think the first space that you experience leadership is in your home. And being the daughter of Jamaican immigrants who valued faith, but also hard work, planning for the future, and thinking about legacy. My parents didn't just come here for themselves to make a better life, but they thought to make a better life for the future. And so a lot of times our parents would strive to me and my two sisters that, you know, each generation does better than the last. And so your mom and I came here. This is what my dad would normally say. Your mom and I came here and we want you to do better than we've done. And so coming up in the Bronx, you're surrounded by all kinds of things, all types of people. There are many ways that you can go the wrong way, but I'm thankful that I had a family who consistently drove me towards good after school activities that helped keep me off the streets and keep me out of bad crowds and towards good ones. I also had amazing teachers who I was a pretty good student in school. And so instead of just saying, you know, hope you do well, they encouraged me and got me into different programs that helped. I guess you could say, really allowed me to explore my interests and explore my leadership capabilities, explore my interest in science, and have at it. So I had an awesome experience in the Bronx. I had a mixture of both hanging out on the streets and kind of doing some awesome programs and activities at a young age. So I'm pretty grateful for that.
Wow, that's great. I can tell your parents have instilled some very valuable principles in you to be able to be accomplished as you are. When we're thinking about women in leadership, chemistry, and I don't know about much about the chemistry field as such. Can you talk about the chemistry field and what is it like having to lead in that particular field of interest and profession?
Yeah, so I would say the field of chemistry is broad. I think often when people think of science, they might think of biology, chemistry, and physics. Those are the kind of three major breakdowns. You could involve math and computer science, but when you talk about hardcore sciences, those would be the three major breakdowns. A lot of women actually go into the biology field, but you see um, that break down when it gets into physics or chemistry. And then chemistry by itself has many different facets. You have organic chemistry, and I love to tell people that's the kind of chemistry you see on TV, like with Breaking Bad. A lot of people, things are bubbling in the kitchen, smoke is coming out. That's kind of like organic, wet chemistry. But there's this other field of chemistry that is closer to, I mean, there are a lot of subdivisions, but there are other fields that are more closer to the physics side and kind of what's going on that's smaller than the eye can see and has to deal with kind of atoms and manipulating atoms to get what you want around you. And so I think the most consumer friendly version of chemistry that you probably aren't noticing in the world around you are probably the shoes that you wear, the foam that makes up your gaming chair that you're sitting in. All of those things we manipulate to be more user friendly, more comfortable, more soft. And there's chemistry involved in those processes, engineering, but also chemistry in your cell phone. The way it works, the way it does, is both a mixture of physics and chemistry. And so my field and leading in those kind of fields is interesting, to say the least. I think I'm still pretty young in my leadership journey and career. So a lot of times, being a good follower of great leaders is how I tend to lead. I tend to lean on a lot of male mentors, but it's a collaborative approach. Often I work on teams. For the past 5 years as a consultant and a materials kind of chemist, I work with people all over the world. And if you're a leader who can drive collaboration, if you're a leader who can drive solutions, then it's difficult, but it's not hard. And I think I had two things working on my side. One, I was the expert at what I did. And so no matter the age group of the room that I was sitting in, whether I was 50, people were 50, people are in their 30s, engineers or not, the gift that I had was I was the expert at what I did. And so I had a boss who was very encouraging, who said, Darlene, no matter who walks into the room, you're the expert at what you do. And so lead from that place, drive solution from that place, and try to get it. And he's like, if anyone questions you, let them know that your boss likely agrees with what you suggest. But if you can drive collaboration and if you can drive solutions, often people will come towards my side. It takes one or two times after I've proven myself through my expertise. But after that point, people kind of get on board, no matter what, because they want solutions. And so when I lead from that place, I often find success.
Wow, that sounds very interesting in terms of having a number of different chemists in those in a particular field, even if they're older, having to put that confidence and weight on your shoulders to be the leader and say, okay, well, you got to trust me on this. This is I'm the expert in this field. That's pretty heavy weight to carry. So how is that mantle that you carry when it says, okay, everybody is listening to me because I am the expert? Do you have does it occur to you that, well, maybe what happens if I'm wrong?
Yes, all the time. So I would say now I'm in a new field. So the pharmaceutical industry is very different.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get there. But in the previous industry, two things that I kind of kept in mind, because we were driving collaboration and because we were driving solution, it was okay to be wrong. Um, it was okay to be wrong if I kept asking good questions. So if I suspected one scenario, so I think the best way I could put it is I could be the expert, but I'm not afraid of being wrong. And so what that looks like in a room is I can give a suggestion with confidence and say, based on what I know, here is my solution, or here is what I think is going on. And that what I'm very open to is feedback from my client saying, actually, our industry, because I work with people in multiple industries, something may work differently in medical devices than they would on the manufacturing floor of a defense company. And that might work differently than a company who works with optics or optical lenses that go up in the telescope in space. So what I'm very open to is listening to hear about their industry and how various types of chemistry or chemicals affect their industry differently. Because I could have the same chemical that affects 3 industries differently. So if I'm wrong in presenting it, what I'm saying is, let me ask some more good questions. Let me ask some more good questions that can lead to the right solution. And so thankfully, I had amazing bosses and amazing leaders that I could go to check my ideas. But if we were wrong, it was never the end all be all. It's always, how can we drive a better solution? And in the future, how can we make sure that this never happens again? So in the first 2 years that I was working, that was a question that was on my mind every day. Yes, relative to the room, I am the expert, but thankfully I had a boss who was an expert in his field. I think I was in it 2, 3 years. He'd been in the field over 10 years. And so it's nice to have someone to fall back to. But if we were wrong, the nice thing in the sciences are, okay, how wrong are we? To what magnitude, right? Is it a 10-fold magnitude, or is it a 100-fold magnitude? And how can we make corrective measures so that we catch it next time and it never happens again in the future? And so I think sometimes when I was starting out, failing was more of an issue than getting to a solution. But if you always are driving the idea that we're getting solutions in science, I had good mentors who used to say, getting a no is still an answer. And so if you have an absolute no, then you know what way not to go. And now you can drive and go in a direction that will lead you to a yes or to the answers that you need. So I think I've learned not to fear being wrong, because I can always drive a path forward to a solution.
Well, that's good. That's good. So here's kind of diving a little deeper in leadership. As a woman of color in your particular field, um, what are the challenges that you have as a woman of color? And also, are there any challenges that also relate to leading men? You're a manager now, doing all types of programs and projects.
Yeah.
I just think in my mind when I see women of color going into those high sciences and program management, what comes to my mind is the Hidden Figures movie. So it's the Hidden Figures movie. That was something that was really just mind blowing, how these women were in NASA, but yet they had a hard time being, doing their jobs and being leaders. So how is that for you?
Yeah, so thankfully, although slowly, times have changed, and they are changing for the better. Many companies recognize that to have a a global foothold and a global share in the market, you have to work with all kinds of people, men and women, various minorities, various ethnic groups. And so you better figure out a way to collaborate and work with people who don't look like you. And so, in thinking about this question, I'm not sure if I've encountered uh, issues because I'm a woman, because I'm a minority, or because I'm young. So a lot of people that I work with can be up to 30 or 40 years my senior. Many of the people that I work with actually are from all over the world, so that is nice. But a, a large majority still tend to be men. And so leading men is always very interesting. And I'm still growing and I'm still learning, because they are, I think, solution driven sometimes, or maybe kind of direct task kind of driven. I mean, I don't think I'm capturing it the way I want, but sometimes leading men, you just have to do it in a particular way. Um, and so I think the upside is being from a science background. I am always driving a question and answer, not speaking in the abstract. And I think that's helpful when I'm leading men. Don't speak in the abstract. Let's be direct. Let's be specific. And let's get to the next point before we drive the whole picture. Sometimes in leading women, you kind of, and I don't want to make a blanket statement, right? You know, the genders, they do vary, but in leading women sometimes, there are other things that you have to think about and can come off as harsh if you're just too direct or too solution driven. And so keeping that in mind with all people, what I try to do is learn the person, men, women, irrespective of what it was, you know, what is important to you. And that way, when I find out what you value or what's important to you, I can change my messaging so that it speaks to you and allows you to do the work going forward. It does take some time and a little bit of hard work. You know, I have 13 to 19 clients at any given time. So learning the messaging that I need for each client takes some time and some dedication. But with my internal team members, because I'm a scientist, I can use my expertise previously to encourage my lab team members. Hey, I've been where you are. Tell me the details and let's see how we can shape the story to drive a solution to this problem. I think working with other team members, it's always about how am I communicating in a way that you can receive. So it takes some time to learn that based on the person and based on gender, but that's usually what I default to.
That's good though. I mean, it seems like you have a strategy.
Yeah.
Does it
sometimes it works, other times.
Okay. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay.
I'm still learning.
That's good. You have a strategy. That's excellent. That's very good. So as you're leading in that particular field of pharmaceuticals, and you're doing project management, how does that translate itself when it comes to being a youth leader and being working with programs and leading people in that field of pharmaceuticals? How does those things correlate with each other in your work with young people?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think what I'm learning in the pharmaceutical field is the difference between management and leadership. It's very clear that those are two different skill sets, and you don't want to confuse great management for good leadership or vice versa. And so I think as it translates to working with young people or working with youth, what I find is, am I managing the situation or am I leading the situation? Am I helping them to do whatever it is that they think is the most important thing and helping them in their journey in a very small-minded way? Or am I opening and broadening their eyes to think about a bigger picture, a broader vision, leading and guiding them towards purpose rather than just focusing on getting the homework right, handing it in on time? All important skills. But I think the difference between managers and leaders is leaders do a good job of helping people to innovate and think about the broader picture and how we're doing what we're doing and how we can do it better. Good managers make sure that we get the task at hand done really well. So I think in my youth work, just very personally, I just try to help young people think about the bigger picture, help them think about purpose. But in the organization piece of it all, I still have to get volunteers together, direct them in a vision of what we're trying to do in these young people's lives and kind of coordinate that. And so I guess it translates there as well. But I think thinking about leadership on a team level and an individual level is probably the ways that I bounce back and forth between the two. And one usually helps the other.
It's good. You're doing a good job.
Thank you. Sometimes I don't know, so thank you.
Balance. It's definitely a balance.
It absolutely is.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance and some hard decisions that you have to make as a leader.
Yeah.
So when it comes to leadership, um, as we're talking about faith, getting into the subject of faith in our work, because oftentimes when it comes to our work, we don't necessarily know how our values according to scripture and the word of God and being a believer and the work that we do, whether that's in from law to hospitality or whatever industry it is. So how does faith play a role in your everyday work experience as a chemist and a project manager working in pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I think my faith informs who I am and how I see the world. And so at first, it forms me. It helps me to get a right mindset about myself, who I am, and how I walk into a room. But I think there's a scripture that says, like, honor all men and love the brethren. And so that's just a very simple way that it's like, okay, when I walk into a room, no matter my setting, no matter my what like what I do, am I honoring everybody in the room? Am I respecting and hearing them, and engaging with them in a way that says you have value, you have worth, and you're important to the team? But I think that's probably the most important way that it grounds me, it informs who I am, and it shows me how to view the world so that when I walk into the room, I'm confident to to be who I need to be at that point in time. Now, sure, it affects other things in terms of probably my ethics and moralities when I make decisions, but and it definitely, I'm praying for my team, whether they know it or not. I'm praying for myself, whether they know it or not. But I think it took me a while to figure that out because I do work in such a, not fact, yes, fact based, but it's sometimes when I first started working with scientists, like there was no room for God. Like, what am I going to do? Ask him to pray to help me fix my instrument? The short answer is yes, you can pray for that. He does help. But as I moved from working the hardcore science and being in the lab myself, I find that as I work more with people, that I definitely look to my faith to teach me how to engage with people well, and to make sure that I'm right so that I can lead from a better place. Often I find that when leaders aren't right within, it bleeds out into how they manage and lead. So my hope is that it affects me first so that I can leave a positive light, um, in whatever room I walk into.
Wow, that's great. So when it comes to hard decisions, and I'm talking about in your industry, and as it kind of trickles down, what kind of hard decisions do you kind of experience as a leader in the industry that you're in and leading people and saying, okay, we have to make a very difficult decision. I don't know how free you are to say what that might be, but I'm just
Yeah.
kind of just going to throw out there and just say, what are the challenging decisions that the pharmaceutical industry might have, and how does that trickle down to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that a lot of the products that we test, and I'm still learning, but a lot of products that we test are, they go into humans and they're on their way to being into clinical trials. And if they haven't progressed that far, our testing impacts, if a company succeeds or fails and does a financial bust. So yeah, it's kind of sometimes a big deal. You know, companies come to you urgent urgently and needing various testing right away. But we have to make sure that we do it with quality, and that we're not just giving them the answers that they want, but the answers that they need. And that's something that I even learned from my old company. That translates across industries, that you want to provide quality science, because when the FDA reviews it, when quality control reviews it, if there's a kink in the armor, we're going to do a lot of testing to find it before it gets into humans. And so a lot of the difficult decisions we find are taking our clients who are in an urgent mode, as they should be if they're on their way to clinical trials or testing, slow them down and go, okay, here's what's actually urgent and important, and here's how we can meet your timelines. But also, let's make some good decisions to make sure that we're getting quality service, quality science to back up your very important data. So I'm about 7 months in, and I'm having these ongoing conversations with my supervisor about the impact of the decisions that we make. And the critical thing that we always talk about is making sure we're giving quality testing. Yes, we want to meet our clients' timelines and aid them as best we can, but we always want to do it with good science. And so in the pharmaceutical world, it's called GMP, good manufacturing practices. And so our company is certified to do that. And that's why people come to us. And so those are some of the difficult decisions. Every day is a new, interesting way to communicate that to clients, but it's fun. I think that's where the fun comes in.
That's great. I'm gonna throw one more question at you. I think I have one more question to throw at you. It's
Okay.
kind of what they call the Hail Mary pass in basketball and football.
Oh boy.
So either we're gonna catch you to lose the game or we're gonna catch you to win the game. Okay.
Okay.
We got about 5 minutes left. We're gonna just throw that ball. We have come through, we're in a pandemic. We're in a pandemic.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of questions about the vaccines. There's still people that are very afraid to take the vaccines. Still have questions about testing.
Mm-hmm.
They have questions about, does it really work? Is it conspiracy theory? What,
Yeah.
and all these different things that are going around. And that young people now, okay, the FDA said, okay, let's get our young people tested. We did the testing already on the vaccines, and we're going to give up the vaccines. From a standpoint of working in pharmaceuticals and as a chemist, because we had a conversation with a epidemiologist already.
Yeah.
I want to hear from you what your thoughts are on this whole back and forth when it comes to this vaccine and vaccinations.
Yeah. So I could understand people's hesitancy. And if you're a person of color, I absolutely understand your hesitancy. The US doesn't have a great history of treating us well in terms of the medical field. But if I were to come at it from a chemistry perspective, the research that has been done to expedite these vaccines builds on decades of research. And so often what people don't recognize is testing is always happening at every point. Like before it gets to you, and that's in a lot of fields, before it gets to a person on market, it has to go through a battery of testing to make sure that it works, that it's effective, and if it is effective, how effective it can be. And so there are some vaccines or medicines or parts of the vaccine that get emergency or expedited timelines to get through the FDA faster. But the one perspective that I could say is no one got their product through to the FDA in a year. They either had to prove it with decades of research, or they had to prove that what they were building on is stable and consistent and can be in the human body without issues. I think if more people were to research how many companies fail and lose millions of dollars trying to get products to market, they would see how many people are working to make good products that go well in the human body. The other aspect of this to think about is there are regulatory practices that often hold up a process. And because the entire world was invested in getting something that worked, not just for the US, but for the entire world population, it created collaboration in a way that probably was unprecedented before. Now I've collaborated, I've had the opportunity to go to Israel in my undergrad to do research. I've had the opportunities to work with people in the Philippines, just all over the world. So that's happening in science all the time. But this concerted effort focused on one thing at one time is also what helped for these vaccines to be created in such a fast way. So I would just allow people to take that into consideration. COVID-19, I think, is a derivative of SARS, which we saw a long time ago. So it's not that this just appeared and we just found a vaccine. It's really dependent on decades of research. So I can understand your hesitancy, but please know that if it's getting to you, it's gone through a battery of tests to prove its effectiveness and to prove that it's not harmful in humans.
Wow. That's a very good explanation on that side of it. That's great. Thank you for letting us know how that happens in the process, because you're involved in much of that, that activity and leading people in that industry. So thank you. Thank you so much for being on BLAW Live. I really appreciate you coming and talking about your leadership in your industry and how you lead personally. For those of you who are listening, we want to thank you for coming and being a part of BLAW Live and each and every Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. BLAW Live stands for Bishop Larry Ward, and we are here to encourage you, to inspire you, and also to give you some point of information to live life better. So if you like what you're hearing and enjoy what you're hearing, tell someone, subscribe to our channel. And I want to thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for Tony McGrath, who's always helpful with us putting together and making sure our technology is working flawlessly. So we just want to thank Tony for assisting us. So without further ado, I want to just dismiss you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face to shine upon you. May God be gracious unto you and give you his peace, his shalom, nothing missing, nothing broken. Have a good evening and look forward to seeing you on next week. Thanks, Darlene. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.